They mocked the pain. They laughed at the falls. They said wrestling was just scripted drama, no real danger, no real consequences, just men and women pretending to fight for show. But no amount of clever storytelling or special effects could prepare the world for what unfolded that tragic Tuesday night outside Mercy General Hospital, where Becky Lynch, one of WWE's fiercest warriors, was reduced to a sobbing wreck, clutching at air as paramedics wheeled her husband Seth Rollins through the hospital's sliding doors. This wasn't a promo. This wasn't part of the show. This was real life crumbling in slow motion, and the fallout exposed an uncomfortable truth the WWE Universe wasn't ready to face. While executives scrambled to preserve their empire's image, one of wrestling's most iconic couples was being torn apart by trauma, uncertainty, and corporate indifference. What happened that night at the Allstate Arena was supposed to be routine. Seth Rollins, a seasoned veteran known as the Monday Night Messiah, facing off against Austin Theory in what fans expected to be a technical masterclass. But the precision of the performance, the years of muscle memory and timing that Seth had perfected, couldn't save him from a freak moment that turned routine into tragedy. A misstep during a superkick counter sent a shockwave through the crowd, but not the kind designed to entertain. The sickening crack of bone breaking reverberated across the arena, silencing thousands. Seth collapsed, not in the theatrical way wrestlers sell pain, but with the limp, uncontrolled fall of a man whose body had just betrayed him in the worst possible way. His left leg twisted grotesquely, bone tearing through flesh. It wasn't a bump. It was a medical emergency. And what did WWE do? They kept the show going. The cameras kept rolling. The commentary team scrambled to improvise. Austin Theory, visibly shaken, was the only one who did what was right, dropping character to attend to a colleague in agony. Backstage, Becky Lynch screamed. She had been watching the monitor and knew instantly that this wasn't part of the script. She tried to run to the ring, but security held her back under orders. Orders that prioritized protocol and optics over humanity. And this is where the corporate rot began to show. WWE's medical team, which prides itself on world-class readiness, took 4 excruciating minutes to reach the ring. For minutes where Seth lay in blinding pain, bleeding, possibly slipping into shock, while decision-makers backstage debated whether breaking kayfabe was worth the cost. Eyewitnesses say the hesitation came from higher-ups who weren't sure if they wanted real-life medical intervention aired live. So they waited. And Seth suffered. By the time medical staff finally reached him, the injury had already progressed to something far worse than a simple fracture. Nerve damage, severe blood loss, and the risk of permanent mobility loss meant Seth couldn't be moved. For the first time in years, EMTs were called directly into the arena, bypassing the usual backstage protocols. It was a move that showed just how grave the situation was. As the stretcher rolled down the ramp, fans collectively realized this wasn't part of the act. Becky Lynch finally broke through security just as her husband was being loaded up, throwing herself onto the stretcher in a frantic, tear-soaked effort to comfort him. She begged the cameraman to stop filming, to give them privacy. They refused. Because the directive was clear: keep recording. Not for medical records. Not for legal protection. But for potential storyline content. Because tragedy sells. And this, in their eyes, was gold. The ambulance ride to Mercy General was a blur of beeping monitors, shouted commands, and Becky Lynch clutching Seth's hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point, he asked if they had finished the match. Even drugged, even broken, his concern was for the show. For the fans. For doing his job. Becky later posted, then deleted, an emotional message about those 18 minutes in the ambulance. She described the fear, the helplessness, the moment she thought she was going to lose him before they even reached the hospital. Upon arrival, Seth was rushed into emergency surgery while Becky, still in her gear and still soaked in blood, sat alone in a waiting room for hours, breaking into sobs that staff said echoed through the hall. The 6.5-hour surgery that followed revealed the full extent of the damage. Not just a compound fracture, but serious nerve compromise and vascular trauma that could impact his mobility forever. Doctors weren't sure he'd walk without pain again, let alone wrestle. And as this medical crisis unfolded, WWE was already prepping press statements, softening the story, brainstorming how they could weave this into future programming. Legal was involved. PR was involved. Creative was involved. The human element? Ignored. When Seth awoke in the ICU, Becky was still there. Still holding on. Still whispering that he was going to be okay. His first words, reportedly, were about whether the match had aired properly. That level of devotion to the craft should have been met with respect. Instead, it was met with exploitation. Over the following days, Seth endured 3 more surgeries to repair the extensive damage. Becky never left his side. Friends visited, some to offer comfort, some to deliver news. Triple H showed up, reportedly offering Seth a front office job in case he couldn't return to the ring. It was a nice gesture, but it was also an unspoken confirmation that WWE believed his in-ring career might be over. And while support poured in from fans and fellow wrestlers, so did the criticism. CM Punk fired shots at WWE management, calling out the company's toxic prioritization of profit over people. Social media exploded with outrage over the 4-minute delay in medical response. The decision to film Becky at her most vulnerable moment was labeled grotesque and unethical. Hashtags like #JusticeForSeth and #ProtectOurWrestlers trended globally. But as the outcry grew, so did the silence from WWE headquarters. No apology. No accountability. No reform. Meanwhile, the long-term financial and emotional toll of this injury has started to come into view. Even top stars like Seth and Becky, who presumably earn well, are now facing mounting medical bills, potential career loss, and months, if not years, of uncertainty. And through it all, WWE continues to market their brand as the safest place to perform. The truth, as exposed by this heartbreaking saga, is far more complicated. Wrestling may be scripted, but the pain is real. The sacrifices are real. The tears, the blood, the trauma, none of that is fiction. Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins are no longer just performers, they're survivors. And their story has become a rallying cry for change. A demand that wrestling promotions, fans, and corporate executives stop treating wrestlers like disposable props and start treating them like the human beings they are. This story isn't over. Seth's recovery is ongoing. Becky's strength continues to inspire. And the wrestling world waits to see what WWE will do, if anything, to ensure no one else has to suffer the same fate. Until then, all we can do is tell the truth, honor the pain, and hope that someday, the roar of the crowd won't come at such a brutal cost.